Hey neighbor, today we're talking about tips and tricks on growing onions, how you can be successful. These two products right here, we're going to talk about them a lot. First, let's walk through and show you our onions that we're shipping out. This is just part of them. We shipped out, I don't know, probably 10 of these yesterday, and we're packing again today. It is in the middle of onion shipping season for us. All right, and you can see here we're labeling the Sapphire, which is our red onion. We're unpacking them out of the bags right here. Fedora, Sapelo, get them shipped up in the boxes and getting them out to use so that you can get your onions planted. Now, once you get them planted, what are you going to do? Let's cover that. Now, here in the South, we're planting short day onions, but this information I'm going to give you today applies to short day onions, intermediate day, and long day onions. So regardless where you live at, these tips on fertility and disease control are going to apply the same to you. Now, our planting dates are going to be different. Here we are in the deep South with these short day onions. We're going to plant in November. You guys with the intermediate day and the long day, you're going to be planting early spring on into spring. But the fundamentals of growing onions is the same. All right, so you got your onions planted. What do you do as far as fertility? Now, if you're planting on drip tape, as I did right here, we've got an onion growing guide right here that lays out to you how you can fertilize your onions through the drip tape. You can inject most of it through there. You can pre-plant, put in your organic fertilizer, as you see right here. You can incorporate that into the soil a week or so before, and then you can switch over to your drip, injecting it with a Hoss fertilizer injector, and inject your nutrients through that. Now, the guidelines that we show in the onion growing guide is just that, it's guidelines. Now, I don't know what your soil type is, or I don't know what your nutrient load of your soil is, and all that can make a difference on exactly what you need to put in there. What we do in our onion growing guide is simply a guide. So that shows you what we do with our soils, but you may want to adjust that to your particular type soils and your nutrient load of your soil. Could be different for everyone. So if you're using drip tape, simple. Use the onion growing guide as a reference guide to what you need to put in there. But let's just say that you don't use drip tape, but you still want to grow these big pretty onions. Well, here's some tricks and tips that could help you. What you want to use is you want to use a good balanced fertilizer and alternate it with ammonium sulfate. Now, onions in particular love nitrogen. You got to have nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus is your basis. That is covered in our 10-10-10 all-purpose Hoss fertilizer. So you want to use that as what we call the base, but then you want to alternate with an ammonium sulfate. Onions also love sulfur. So that's the key there, is alternating with a good base fertilizer, whether it be a granular 10-10-10 or water-soluble 20-20-20, or even the complete organic. It's pretty much a base fertilizer. So we got that, but we want to alternate with ammonium sulfate. Now, our ammonium sulfate is greenhouse grade. Not all ammonium sulfates are greenhouse grades. And what that means is it is soluble and can also be used as a granular as a side dress. So you cannot put all ammonium sulfates in the Hoss fertilizer injector and expect them to be soluble. You want to make sure you use a greenhouse grade, which ours is. The good thing about that is you can also side dress with it like you would your normal fertilizer. Now, onions also need boron, they need zinc, they need magnesium. That is in our 10-10-10 fertilizer, our base fertilizer. It's also in our micro boost. So you can get those from either source you want to, but you want to make sure that you somehow or another get those micronutrients applied to your onions as well. So let's just think about it for a minute. If we're not using drip irrigation, what we could do is we could use our complete organic as a pre-plant or as a first fertilizer there. And I like it because it's organic and it just does a lot for the plants. Plants love it. And let's switch over after that to our base 10-10-10, which has that magnesium boron and zinc in it. Do that as our base and then alternate fertilizer with ammonium sulfate. We want to grow these onions early on. We want to have good, healthy tops, because that top is what's going to make that bulb get bigger come time for that onion to bulb. So we want to focus on growing that top as much as we can at the first part of the onion growing season. Now, insects is really not a big thing for onions in the home garden. If you do end up with some kind of insect problem in there, you can use something like the Bug Buster 2 to treat them with. I normally don't ever have to treat my onions with the insecticide. I have on occasion got some aphids on them in late spring there, but for the most part, insects is not a problem that I have. Now, disease on onions, that's a different story. Onions are notorious for having disease problems. So we definitely want to make sure that we have a disease spray program for our onions for days just like today where it's overcast and it's raining a little bit. We seem to have these type of days set up our onions for disease problems. Now, particularly here in my garden, I always have a problem with blight every year, but there's a lot of different diseases that can jump on onions, and they're best prevented and not cured. And then we're going to talk about how you prevent from having disease on your onions. First of all, you want to make sure that you have a preventative spray program. And the two chemicals I'm going to talk about today is vegetable, flower, fruit, and ornamental fungicide. And the active ingredient here is chlorothianil. Now this is old chemistry that's been around a long, long time, and it still works great. It settles out a little bit, so you want to make sure you shake this up good here. If you leave it in your sprayer overnight, then it will settle out some. So I always recommend whatever you mix up, try to use out. Now this right here is what we consider a protective. What it does is it coats that plant down. As some of the farmers say, it paints the plant, and it prevents that fungus or disease from entering in the plant. Just imagine it is a shield on that onion plant. You want to make sure you get good coverage when you spray, and it's going to turn them a white type color, but that's your shield. It won't let that fungus and disease come into the plant, so it actually creates a barrier there. And that is the mode of action on chlorothianil. Now, I think the days that you need to treat this here is going to be somewhere around 7 to 14 days. And if you get a heavy, heavy rain, it will wash some of it off. It sticks pretty good, but it can be washed off. If it's washed off, then it's not doing its job and you have to reapply it. Now, liquid cop has a different mode of action. Liquid cop is a copper fungicide. It's been around for a long, long time and still works good. The good thing about these two fungicides I'm talking about today is we don't have any resistance to them, which is good. But we do need to rotate them because they have different modes of action, and that keeps from any of the disease getting in there. Now what this actually does, it actually attacks that fungi and starves it to death once it tries to enter into the plant there. So it makes the fungi unhealthy and it dies before it gets in the plant when it comes into contact with this copper fungicide. So that works really good. You spray this every 7 to 14 days just like you would the other one here. Now a couple of things about copper sulfate. You don't want to spray it in the heat of the day. I normally like to spray it in the morning or the afternoon. It doesn't like a lot of hot applications if it was to get real hot on you, so I don't recommend that. Another thing too, normally we don't mix our copper sulfate. We spray it as a standalone product. Now there's one more out there that we don't carry, but I always love to give you the other options out there. There's a chemical out there, an old chemical called Manab. We used to call it Manzate back in the day. Been around forever. Still works really good as a fungicide for onions. We don't carry it, but you can buy it out there from other companies out there. Manab is the active ingredient in it. Works the same way. I still recommend rotating it with products like this right here. But the three main type fungicides for the home garden for onions is Manab, copper, and chlorothianil. Here we're growing multiplying onions. Over there we got bulb onions. This information I give you today, regardless what kind of onion it is, even if you're growing a bunch of onions, you need to use the same strategy for growing any of these. These multiplying onions and those bunching onions will get the same diseases that our bulbing onions do. So fertility, make sure you rotate your balanced fertilizer with ammonium sulfate because onions love sulfur. Make sure you use a product that's got zinc in it, magnesium and boron in it to grow that healthy plant, and to keep it nice and healthy, disease. Keep it sprayed on a regular schedule with a fungicide.